Hey everybody, and welcome to MyHR Facebook Live number 8, I think. So we're certainly getting through them. We did have a month off there. It's been a busy time for us here at MyHR. We have written our 20,000th employment agreement, which was a pretty significant milestone. Business is growing, things are going really well here. So yeah, it's been pretty flat out. But it's good to get back into it, and I think today's topic's going to be quite interesting. So the usual sort of rules apply. I guess there's questions. I've got someone in the room helping me, so feel free to post questions in the app, and we'll get to those either as we go or at the end. We do record them, and they're available on our YouTube channel after this, and then we share through Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you miss out or you have to leave partway through, you can go back and check them out. You can also go back and look at the older ones, and if any of them prompt questions, just post some questions on our Facebook page, LinkedIn, email the team direct. We don't mind. We're keen to hear from you. One of the things I'll also say is jump in and like us on Facebook and follow us on LinkedIn, because then you will get these updates regularly. You'll be aware of when we're doing things like the Facebook Live. And we have this awesome resources section on our website that covers a whole bunch of really useful stuff around from, functional HR support, like how to run a disciplinary, 90-day trial periods, how to recruit well, through to just more general support in terms of things like running remuneration reviews and establishing good quality performance reviews and that sort of thing. A lot of useful content there, so get in there, have a look at it. It's all free, which is the best thing. So today's topic is about managing issues before they become disciplinary, and this is something that we spend a lot of time doing, and most employers do. And I find it really interesting because you sort of read the papers and you hear about employers being fined and court cases taking place and things, and it's almost as if there's this kind of impression that every employer in the country spends at least one day a month in mediation or something like that. But we know that's just not true. If you think about the vast number of people who are employed in New Zealand, most of the issues with those employment relationships are resolved in employment through discussion with the person and their boss, the business owner or the manager. A small number require some external help, but nevertheless are still resolved in employment. That external help might be an advocate, a lawyer, a union rep, something like that. A small number progress to mediation, where you need some formal support to resolve. A tiny number go to the Employment Relations Authority, and an even smaller number end up at the employment court. So the number of issues that are litigated in the context of the entire kind of working population of New Zealand is really, really tiny. And so people get heavily focused on disciplinary issues. And in fact, most things, as we know, are resolved outside of that. Disciplinary is actually pretty easy, even though it's scary for a lot of people. It's a pretty simple process in that it is fairly well defined. There is a process you need to follow, your letters and your adjournments, your investigations, your notifications, right to representation, that sort of thing. It is a formal and structured process. The real trick is all of the stuff that happens before that in the day-to-day relationship, and you get this stuff right, you will avoid disciplinary. And it comes back to the fundamental principle that we like to talk about, and that is that the employment relationship, first and foremost, is a human relationship. It is a legal relationship secondarily, and the lawyers might disagree with me there, but there is a legal framework, obviously, that you are required to have in place. You must have a written agreement, otherwise you get $20,000 fines from the Labour Inspectorate, that sort of thing. But once that legal foundation is in place, the day-to-day stuff is about relationships with humans. And there are ways to manage issues, resolve issues, deal with issues that don't require letters and formal sit-downs and formal processes. And that's really what I'm going to sort of cover today quite quickly. And just to be clear, there are certain times when a disciplinary is the only approach, and I'm not covering that today. There are instances of quite serious misconduct, behaviour, drug taking, fighting, bullying, harassment, sexual harassment. There are things that when they occur, there is no other adequate response other than formal disciplinary. But that's not what we're covering today. We're covering just things like inappropriate or negative, say, behaviour. Poor performance creeping into somebody's work, that kind of thing, stuff that builds up over time, things that are, those niggles that you had, you go, well, this isn't quite perfect, but it's not really bad enough to warrant disciplinary, but I need to do something about it. So it is part of being a good manager or leader, fundamentally. And I guess the first question is, so why bother? Why not just carry on about our way, and then if things go bad, we go and throw the book at people, and if things go well, then we can celebrate and kind of almost leave it to chance. And the reason is, well, firstly, you might avoid disciplinary and therefore reduce your risk of grievance. It will ultimately save you time in the long run, and it will maintain better relationships in employment, because overtly negative or even passive aggressive or passive negative behaviour can have an incredibly poor impact on the whole organisation if you allow this stuff to continue. So it's not just about the person that is behaving badly, it's about all of the people around them. So if you do nothing about it, it can have significant impacts on your staff retention, on morale, and on performance of the overall team, which is kind of critical. So that's why you want to do this. How do you do it? Well, essentially, issues management, if you like, is about behaviour change. Somebody is doing something or doing it in a way that is not aligned to what you need or what is acceptable. You need to change that behaviour to get the outcomes that you want. And behaviour change is tough, right? It is very tough. And we're going to look at some of the things that govern behaviour change that can help you and that can get in the way. Fundamentally, humans don't like change, so you have to be aware of that and figure out how to deal with that. Humans do respond to incentives, and that's not cash necessarily. It might be, but not always. We are irrational, so we very seldom make decisions based on logic, even though we might like to think that we do. We do want to feel part of a group and avoid isolation, and we want to feel in control. So these are some of the overriding principles that you keep in mind when you're having these discussions. So how do you implement this stuff in your workplace? You do it by talking to your people. It's kind of that simple, right? Communicating to your people, connecting with them, understanding them is the best way. Knowing what is going on with them and in their lives. Because when you know and when you're aware of things, you can see changes or subtle changes. You can give feedback, and feedback that is often more likely to be taken on. So if we look at this issue of, say, of us not liking change, of humans not liking maybe negative feedback or not wanting to change, when you are communicating what you want or what you expect out of someone, we encourage you to rely on what we call the platinum rule. The golden rule of, treat others as you wish to be treated, or speak to others as you wish to be spoken to, we don't think is good enough. The platinum rule is treat others as they wish to be treated. That is how you can really connect with somebody, and that is how you can really sort of drive some positive behaviour change. And by that I mean, if somebody is a very task-focused person, they're going to respond to you communicating them in a way that is very task-focused. We need this to happen by this date at this time. Here is the list. Here are the things that need to occur. I mean, if you're a people person and less sort of task-focused, that might be difficult for you. But tailor your comms to that personality type. In contrast, a person who is a little more, say, creative, strategic, and people-focused will respond more to you engaging them, and, well, how do you think your behaviour affects other people, and what do you think you need to do to improve that? And it's a connection to their social links into the business as opposed to just a hard and fast black and white task list. So tailoring comms to the individual is critical. Because speaking how you like to be spoken to could mean you're essentially just talking to a brick wall. People won't listen, right? Humans respond to incentives. Incentives can be financial, but they don't have to be. You know, it's not always about saying, if you turn up to work on time, I'm going to give you a $100 bonus, because you're getting a salary or a wage to turn up to work on time. You know, we're not going to pay extra money for this stuff. But incentives can be things that motivate people, that people care about. It can be related to their career progression. It can be related to just recognition by their peers. It can be related in some instances to cash if the behaviour change is appropriate. Be careful about jumping straight into bonuses. There's lots of study around this, and there are instances where it's been identified that bonuses can actually have an overtly negative effect on performance, not positive. One example I like to talk about in this context is was an organisation we did some work with. They had a fixed bonus based on a percentage of salary every year. There was an employee who was up for a maximum of $5,000, and that was at 10% of a base salary of $50,000, and achieved $2,000 of that bonus due to the overall company result. That employee spent more time lamenting the $3,000 they missed out on rather than celebrating the $2,000 that they got. And this is a really common behaviour with bonuses. If you don't meet the maximum, you look at what you lost, not what you've just been given. So Cash incentives, not always. We are irrational creatures. Very few of us make decisions based on logic. It relates to our ego, our emotions, how much we like the person that's talking to us about the change, how much we respect them as to whether or not we will listen to them and take on board their feedback. Their fears and or their desires. So all of these things have an influence on whether or not someone will change. So as a manager or a leader, when you are talking to them about this stuff, when you are trying to change a behavior from something that is negative to something that you need in terms of positive and proactive, these are the sorts of things you need to be aware of. Tailoring to your audience. We want to feel part of a group, and you can use this, and by that I don't mean using it negatively, like the threat of isolation. That's never a good thing, but just this idea that when you're explaining to people the effect of their actions on others, what this means for the overall work environment, how other people feel about it, letting team members down, that kind of thing, that can be quite powerful. We are inherently social creatures, even introverts. This idea that we are part of a tribe is pretty fundamental. And ultimately people want to feel in control, and being in control relies on a sense of choice, that you are given a choice on how to manage this or how to manage an issue. And there is there are some really easy ways to do this when you're dealing with a problem with somebody, and you can simply ask them, what do you think you need to do, or what help would you like from me to help you improve, and you involve them in the process of change. You're highlighting what the issues are, and then you're engaging them in the solution. It really is that simple. And having a sense of control over what's going on around you can be quite powerful. Now, this is really high level stuff for something that can be quite complex and delves into kind of individual personalities and psychology, but I don't want this to sound like it is too complex for you to implement. This can be used in the most basic of process, So let's say you have an employee who's been great for a year and all of a sudden has started turning up late. Never happened before. We often find that clients will phone and go, I've just had enough, they were great for a year, we've now had 2 months with them turning up late every day and they're off the rails and I've got a major problem and I need to run a disciplinary. Instead of waiting 2 months, the conversation that might have happened after the second instance is simply, hey mate, you've been great for a year. In the last week you've been late twice. That's kind of let the other team members down. We're late on a job, we didn't get this thing finished on time, Barry had to do a bit of overtime, whatever it is, you're giving that context in terms of people. What's going on? Are you okay? And is there anything I can do to help? To that, and this is a real example, but the names are changed to protect the innocent, the employee pops up and says, well actually I got kicked out of home last week and I've been sleeping in my car and I didn't want to tell you because I don't want you to think I was a loser, things are a bit up in the air, life's a bit of a mess and I'm not really coping all that well. Awesome, okay, what can we do to help? How can we support this? You've got a bit of leave, why don't you take next week off, get into your new flat, get yourself sorted, is there anything else we can do to help you? Problem gets resolved, the employee took a week off, came back and returned to the person that they were prior, which was a great employee. And in this labour market, you don't want to be going to market to recruit someone. That guy was heading potentially for dismissal. The conversation at the early stage of the issue resolved that. So, while this might sound all very kind of management theory and floaty, it can be used in really practical, basic situations. The last thing I want to say around this is, the other thing is model the behaviour you want to see. There is no point in having policies or fancy statements on posters on the wall and talking about company values and behaviour expectations if you as the manager or the leader do not embody those behaviours. Do not behave in a way that reflects what you want to see from your people. People will follow what you do much more than they will be interested or follow what you say or what the posters on the wall say. And they will certainly resent being performance managed or disciplined for issues that they've actually seen other people or more senior people in an organisation role model. So when you're engaging in these conversations, just be clear on what the issue is, but you can deal with them informally. And if you do, you will find over time that you massively reduce the number of disciplinary processes you run, and actually you'll improve employment relationships overall. There is always a point, of course, when you need to draw a line in the sand. So probably well enough from watching my Facebook Lives before that I'm not overly fluffy person. There is a point where the behaviour just has to stop and formal disciplinary or performance improvement plans need to be implemented. But what I can say about that is if you have done all of these other things before that, it makes a formal disciplinary process so much easier. It makes it more legally robust for you because you have a history of management and feedback to go on. It makes it easier for the person to understand, so they are less reactive and defensive, as in they're not hearing this for the first time. What do you mean you've had a problem with me for the last year? I didn't know about it, I thought I was great. Now I've got a letter that's saying I might get a disciplinary or whatever. Instantly reactive, right? So there are solid legal reasons why you want to do this as well, because if you do have to draw that line in the sand and commence a formal disciplinary process, you've got some good history to manage that from. But in our experience, this will massively reduce the amount of these sorts of things you need to do. So it is possible, it can be done. We recommend you do it. Have a look over. As I say, when we record these things, we do try and put some bullet points up on screen as well. So hopefully some useful tips there. Do we have any questions today, or we're all good? So I'm going to leave it there. Otherwise, this can go on for 2 hours delving into each of these areas. So that's a wrap for this one. Look out for next month. We'll definitely do another one in November, and then December we'll probably be focusing on Christmas parties, because Christmas parties are always a hot topic around the December timeframe. So thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're watching the recording later, then good on you. It's nice to connect. Look forward to hearing from you all. Thanks.